Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. How you doing, Tom?
Good, Kevin. Happy summer. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. You having a good summer?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. We're probably one of the only places in the country that hasn't been sweltering here up here in the Pacific Northwest. It's been sunny and pleasant for the most
Yes.
part.
A week ago or so, a little more than that, I was in Monterey, and I was thinking of California, which is like Seattle weather, right? And it was
Mhm.
just like, oh, how great is this? And I went
Yeah, we
from
get we get 3 good months.
yeah, it's unbelievable. I used to be there for those three. I used to be
You
in the
were.
Pacific Northwest. It breaks my heart. So the one thing I wanted to talk about this week was, there's been some stories out lately. There was a story about Schnucks and caper carts from Instacart. Whole Foods saying that they're going to have Amazon One in all of their stores at this point. The Palm based payment system. And I found myself thinking about tipping points. Right? At what point does the industry find itself where there are so many innovations taking place that it sort of creates momentum? And at some level, it felt during the pandemic, right, when there were a lot of people
Mhm.
innovating because they didn't think of it as innovation, they were just trying to survive,
Survival.
right? We It seemed like we were going to get there quicker than maybe we have. um is that a fair observation?
Well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. I mean, I've been in
I knew.
retail innovation my whole career, and nobody moves fast enough. Except at Amazon, I felt like we moved pretty fast
Right.
when I was there. That was kind of nice for those years. But I mean, clearly we won't go through this in our limited time today, but the industry reacted in COVID, and I think it got a lot of religion. It jumped into the ecom pool as it had to, learned a lot, over relied on partners, frankly, through that. Um, kind of throughout that and post that, lots of retailers kind of taking back the experience, largely to themselves, and then finding that they've needed to kind of develop their own innovation agendas, to thrive in e-commerce going forward. A lot of that coming from, the need to be profit or to be less unprofitable, right, or to strive for profitability, and then also just trying to find that right omni-channel, for lack of a better term, omni-channel formula, right, where you have the integration of these store and digital experiences, and then what are the digital capabilities that you need to develop to serve that. So I think you're definitely seeing way more experimentation happening now than you did certainly pre-pandemic, and frankly even during the pandemic, because again that was largely on the backs of partners. Um, are we at a tipping point? A tipping point, as you said, where lots of these kind of small innovations kind of create this unstoppable momentum. I think we have unstoppable momentum. I still feel like, for the most part, there's a lot of kind of retailers kind of seeing what the kind of hot technology of the day is, and feeling like, well, we've got to do something. We should try that because we know that that's out there. It's emerging. Our competitors are doing it, so we should do it. So I think many of the innovations you see are around that. Some of the innovations you see, particularly around retail media networks, right? That is, a very kind of robust emerging capability that retailers need, because they need that, again, back to the profitability equation. They need additional vendor funding, and that's a great way to get it. So, is it a tipping point? I think there's acceleration. Is it irreversible at this point? I think the customer is demanding that it be irreversible, but I'm not sure that it's a tipping point caused by the retailers. For some retailers, for sure. There are some retailers that clearly have passed that tipping point, that they have tipped and they're accelerating. And for the most part, those tend to be the retailers that have always been innovators, right, and have always been customer centric, and have always been comfortable, being kind of a half a step ahead of the customer with capabilities.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because as you say all that, it occurs to me that at some level, you know, the company, even you say some companies are innovating, right? And they're experimenting here, they're experimenting there. But it, in some ways, it feels like companies are falling back into the old habit of siloing, right? And so you're seeing, so yeah, you're seeing an innovation here. These guys are doing this, these guys are doing that, somebody else is doing this, but the but it's all siloed off in the sense that there's not the kind of it's not like you're seeing a lot of retailers who are doing 5 or 6 different things that are connecting in a way that shows us a clear picture of what, to use the old phrase, retail tomorrow is going to look like, right? Instead they're playing, but they're individual sorts of things. I mean, that's the way it feels to me.
I think for the vast majority of retailers, that is the case. I definitely think you're seeing that. You have innovation mandates that come from the top. You have business owners in e-commerce that that they'll report generally into the business side of the business, right? And then you've got product teams that will report into the tech side of the business. And so those silos need to kind of work with each other to drive innovation at speed. And that tends to be tough. I think if you look at, the retailers that are thriving now, you go to Walmart, right? They're the breadth, depth of their innovation and applicability to the customer is pretty clear. And I think that for them is creating what is, as we go, appearing to be quite a cohesive offering. You look at what HEB is doing, right? As non digital and as non-e-commercey as anyone 5 years ago, 6 years ago. You look at what they're doing now, the size of their e-com business, the growth and the innovation, very customer centric, and you can see good coordination across their teams toward that. So, my sense is there's probably less siloing there. And you see even a retailer like Kroger, and what they're doing and the innovation that they're working on. While it certainly it hasn't seemed to maybe all come together, yeah, you can kind of see where it's going, and you can see the sense of of cohesion that they're building toward their customer. There's other retailers too. I didn't name everybody that's doing well toward that, but it's definitely in the minority, I think. That you're seeing, really be able to be kind of in the game, versus the leaders, right? So you got Amazon, Walmart, Kroger, HEB, companies like them. I think frankly, I think they're separating, for the most part, they're separating from the pack because they're moving faster.
Yeah. And not to downplay the importance of ROI, right? I mean, everybody needs a return on their investment. It does seem, and it's the flavor of the month, right? Retail media networks. We've talked about this before, is that companies are looking at it as a revenue enhancer, right? A new revenue stream. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think considering, at least to the way, and to this point, as much as it's visible, right? Considering how it plays into, again, painting the larger picture of using technology to enhance one's relationship with one's customer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think whenever you take any innovation on, or you consider any innovation, we've talked about customer centricity, here in the innovation conversation forever, and many of us have lived it in our careers. Your innovation agenda has to have the customer at the center of it, because if you fail with the customer in the near, medium, and long term, you will fail as a business, right? Because you're there to serve customers. So that's the customer centricity. And then if you just think about the investment in that innovation and the ROI time horizon for that. If you're up against, most retailers are up against companies like Amazon and Walmart that have pretty advantageous cost of capital, where they can invest in these things. They can they can achieve a lower, return on those investments initially, with the end in mind. But I think that as hard as it is, I think retailers have to look at e-com investments in like a 3-year horizon. But very few investments you make in year one will pay off. That doesn't mean you have to go over the, way over the top and over invest in those. Like, you want to be responsible. You want to understand what you're putting in, what you're going to get out of it. Don't necessarily bleed from the bleeding edge, right? But be out there and as tight as you can be. I think it's really, really key to look at investments in that three-year time horizon. And by year three, you should see any digital investment that you're doing now, or any omni-channel investment that you're doing now, you should be seeing it reap massive returns.
Well, and listen, I mean, Amazon has traditionally been always the example, right, of a company that doesn't worry about this quarter, doesn't worry about this fiscal year. Everything is invested towards with a long-term goal, and yet we have the story that popped yesterday in the information. I have it on Morning Newsbeat today about how investors are starting to push back. I mean, the phrase is they're pushing back against Amazon's big bets and arguing that it has to, at least to investors, provide more transparency, disclose more information about how much money is it spending, and what is it spending its money on, both in terms of technological innovations as well as people. They want to know specifics about Prime numbers, right? How many people are in Prime? Jeff Bezos used to talk about that. Jassy doesn't talk about that as much. They want to know, okay, why are we putting $10 billion into Project Kuiper? I get that, although I still think that having all these satellites in low Earth orbit making high-speed internet available to everybody is probably pretty good for Amazon's business. But
yeah,
investors are not seeing that connect. And the big thing they're asking questions about is, why are we in grocery? It doesn't seem to be checking the boxes. So they're in a moment, it seems to be an inflection point where they're being called, and Bezos, by the way, owns less of the company than he used to own. So they're at a point now where it seems to me where investors are trying to force them to pay more attention to investors. So we're going to find out a lot, I guess, about Andy Jassy in maybe the short term. Is that fair?
Well, is it fair? Yeah, I mean, I think it is fair. I think it's tough. But I think it's fair. Amazon always got the benefit of Jeff. And, Jeff from the very beginning came out to investors and said, we're going to do a lot of things. We're going to experiment. We're going to spend money. We're going to find the wins. When we find those wins, we're going to blow them out. And, we're creating a new business, pioneering new trails. And we're not going to focus on the near term to get there, but over time, you're going to be rewarded. And for the most part, save a few blips along the way and a few larger failed experiments, and they kept delivering more and more and more value. And so they were able to kind of keep the curtain closed, with the wizardry of Amazon happening behind the curtain. Right. I think the Prime numbers that they were sharing were, that was kind of their measuring stick of, this thing is working, and look at the customer base we are acquiring. And yeah, I'm sure that and the number's massive today. I'm sure the growth level of that is flattening. Other companies like Netflix and others, they share their subscriber numbers. I think Amazon probably should share more around that. I think it's fair that, you now have a CEO in the company that is incredibly capable, is incredibly accomplished, however, still needs to prove himself directly with the street at a time when it's tougher. Like, it's a lot harder to run Amazon now than it ever was, right, in the past. So, Andy's running a more complex company in a tougher market, that is, has been propelled forward by this breadth of innovation, that frankly got ahead of itself during the pandemic. Um, and now you've got to kind of check and pull a bunch of that back in. You got to get the cost structure right. You got to determine where we're going to invest, and how we're going to grow. What is important to our customers, what's important to our growth, what's ultimately going to yield the best for our shareholders. It's a lot to wrestle with, for sure. It's a double-edged sword with sharing with the street on that, right? If you don't, if you share too much, then the street will be questioning too much. If you don't share enough, then you're going to be fighting the lack of transparency, which is can be very penalizing. So it's a tough one. Is it fair? Yes. Should Amazon share more? Yes. Are they working to be more transparent? It appears so. They have to strike that right balance. Are investors right to call out Amazon's grocery efforts and say you shouldn't be in grocery? I think it's a fair question to ask Amazon. And I think, you've heard Amazon respond to that by saying grocery is important to us and our customers. We think there's a model there to get right. We're going to keep working on it. I would be surprised if Amazon pulls out of their quest for grocery. It's just too big of a market. I know the information article basically said, well, the industry isn't broken, so Amazon should leave it alone. I think many people might think that there's opportunity to improve the industry. And I think Amazon probably sees that. So yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's a hard business to run. I think it's fair that they're being asked to do more. I think you see them pulling back on a bunch of investments. They shouldn't pull back on everything that's questionable. If they do that, they're going to stifle their engineering, their innovation engine. So I think it's tough. I think they got to share more, but they got to keep innovating.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on all fronts. I mean, I think that, yeah. I mean, listen, and the fact of the matter is, and maybe Jassy has to come right out and say, you can, this is still a long-term play, and it's a harder case to make when you're a 25-year-old company, right? Than when you're a 3-year-old company. When you're a mature company, you've got, but at some point they've got to, and maybe in some ways, and I've made this point about a bunch of other companies lately, at some level, they've lost control of the narrative, right? Jeff used to really control the narrative. Jeff, I'm calling him Jeff like we know each other. Bezos used to control the narrative. And I don't think, not entirely his fault, I don't think Jassy controls the narrative the same way. So somehow he's got to go back in and tell their story in a more effective way.
That's a significant leadership challenge. I would hope and think that Andy's ultimately up for it. Yeah. It is a significant challenge, and you have so many stakeholders, right? You have, and you cross all of their businesses. You have the investor stakeholder, you have the customer stakeholder, you have the partner stakeholder, and you have the employee stakeholder.
Right.
And they're four pretty important stakeholders to keep engaged with and to keep on your side.
Yeah.
And it definitely becomes more and more challenging to do so.
Yeah. And at the same time, they have to live up to the Amazon's iconic sort of nature, right? I mean, Amazon has become an iconic company, and it's really hard to live up to that, right? And so that's
it is. But once you stop striving, once you stop being that standard, it becomes day two.
There you go. All right. Listen, great to see you. I will see you again next month as we kind of pursue our summer schedule.
Yes.
But enjoy your summer, my friend.
Thank you. You too, sir.